Welcome to our Nuttall session. It's been given the title Europe's Refugee Politics in Crisis, Sense and Sensibility, although I sometimes wonder if perhaps a better title might have been Pride and Prejudice. I think my name is Tom Nuttall. I'm the Charlemagne columnist for the Economist magazine. I'm based in Brussels. Thank you all for coming. I think perhaps the first thing to emphasize by way of framing this discussion is that Europe's refugee crisis is very much not over, despite the decline in the number of migrants reaching Greece. I think 90% down in April compared to March, dramatic decline. The deal that's been struck with Turkey, the first part of it, if your benchmark for success is a decline in arrivals, then it's working. There are many other elements to this deal, and I'm sure that we'll get into them in the course of the discussion. One of the ones that people are starting to worry about is the deal to liberalize the visa regime for Turkey, on which the entire agreement hinges. More broadly, until Europe works out how to put a stop to war, poverty, and overpopulation, migration to the richest continent on Earth will be an attractive proposition for large numbers of benighted people from Europe's troubled neighborhood, from Africa and from the Middle East in particular. That is a big test for European foreign policy. It's also a major test for the internal cohesion of the European Union, as we've seen over the course of the last year, perhaps more so than the Euro crisis a few years ago. It's revived an East-West division that many of us thought was fading into history. It's raised fresh questions about the role of German leadership inside the European Union. And it turned what should have been a manageable problem, the arrival of around 1 million people in a continent of 500 million, into what some people have described as an existential crisis. So with me to discuss this, we have an eminent panel with a bonus member as well. Starting on my left here, we have Marina Kaljurand, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Estonia, a veteran of the Foreign Ministry, both in positions in Tallinn and as ambassador to Inter alia, the United States, Russia, and Israel. To her left, we have Artis Pabriks, who is the European Parliament's Rapporteur for the European Border and Coast Guard. He was Foreign Minister of Latvia between 2004 and 2007, subsequently Defence Minister, before joining the European Parliament in the 2004 European elections. To his left, Ruprecht Polenz, who is the President of the German Society for Eastern European Studies, a Senior Fellow of the German Council on Foreign Relations, and a member of the European Council on Foreign Relations, which is my alma mater. So very nice to meet you. And was a CDU deputy in the Bundestag for almost 20 years, during which he chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee. To his left, we have the French Europe Minister, Harlem Désir, who I understand was supposed to be on the previous panel, didn't make it, but was so devastated that he decided that he had to join this one instead. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, sir. Thank you. And to his left, we have Frans Timmermans, the first Vice President of the European Commission, storied career in Dutch politics. Before that, most recently as Foreign Minister, between 2012-2014, played a crucial role in the agreement with Turkey. And as we learned the other day, for those of us who are journalists in Brussels, he's a fan of Game of Thrones. We were devastated when he gave away a major plot development in the press room, and some of us hadn't seen the latest episode. So thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
If you're late, it's your own fault.
It's traditional commission attitude, always blaming someone else. So
yeah. That's a cheap shot, because you just missed the episode, fella, and that's your own problem.
I've seen it now, so I think we can make peace. Maybe, Vice President, I could begin with you.
I thought you would do that.
And perhaps we could start with an easy question.
For a change.
If the deal that's been struck with Turkey on the return of asylum seekers whose claims have been deemed inadmissible in Greece, if this deal falls apart as the President of Turkey has recently suggested that it might. What does that mean for flows across the Aegean? There are plenty of reasons for people who may be thinking, whose calculus may involve the thought, well, I want to get to Greece because I want to travel through the Balkans, I want to go to Germany, I want to go to Sweden. Now, that option has now been closed off. If you reach the islands, you're not going to leave the islands. If you somehow make it to the mainland, you're not going to get any further than that. What does that mean for the leverage that Turkey now has over the European Union, in particular over the discussions on the visa program?
You started a question with if the deal doesn't, and then you say, no, what does it mean for the leverage of Turkey? I'll answer the second part of your question, if that's okay with you. I think Turkey needs this deal as much as we do, because Turkey, as the Interior Minister told me in one of the many negotiations I had with them, Turkey was increasingly suffering also because it became part of the business model of the smugglers, which was a problem because of what was happening in Turkey itself, which was a problem because some of the money would then be used to finance terrorism, and which was a problem because it got completely out of control. So breaking the business model of the smugglers was not just in the European Union's interest, it was also in Turkey's interest. That's my first remark. My second remark is, it would be terribly naive to think that re-engaging with Turkey is only dictated by the necessity to stop people crossing the Aegean into Europe in great numbers. Of course, that is the immediate reason for doing this. But if you look at the geostrategic environment in which Turkey is, if you look at the long-term challenges we will be facing with migration beyond the Syria conflict, having a strategic relationship with Turkey is unavoidable. It is something we need to do. And for many years, we didn't want to do it, and everybody felt comfortable that we didn't need to do it. So Mr. Erdogan could shout at Europe, and Europe could shout back at Mr. Erdogan, and nobody needed to engage. Now, there's a feeling of discomfort in many countries and also in Turkey, because we now understand we need each other to solve a number of problems. And that is going to be the new normal in the next couple of years in our relationship with Turkey, regardless of the immediate effect of the resignation of Prime Minister Davutoglu.
Mm-hmm. I mean, some people have suggested that that resignation of the Prime Minister, who was obviously deeply involved in the discussions with you, with the Germans, in the run-up to the signing of this deal, could have a devastating impact on the future of not only this deal, but the relationship between Turkey and the European Union, particularly if the President doesn't see the strategic imperative in the way that you have just described. Is that an assessment that you would share? How damaging is the resignation of Davutoglu?
Well, with President Erdogan, frankly, you never really know. But at the same time, I have to say that he's also a strategic thinker, and he knows what is at stake. Look at his environment. Look at the challenge Turkey has in its relationship with Russia. Look at the challenge Turkey has in its immediate neighborhood. And look at the only real strategic relationship that could be developed in that neighborhood, and that's with the European Union. And President Erdogan is, I think, aware of that. Now, that doesn't mean that accidents can happen and that things could fall apart. It could fall apart, accidents could happen. But I do think there is deeper strategic thinking behind the need to elaborate, to work on this relationship. And I think it is also important that we take the responsibility to explain to the European public that there's more at stake than just stopping the smugglers, exploiting human misery and stopping people from drowning in the Aegean. And all the critics of the agreement with Turkey in the European Parliament and elsewhere, my question to them is, what is your alternative? In the Balkans, the borders are closed and will not open up. Do you want to condemn Greece to become one big, huge refugee camp with inadmissible humanitarian conditions, with inadmissible pressure on Greek society and Greek statehood? That would be the wrong choice to make. And I think, therefore, engaging with Turkey is the right choice to make.
And a final question. Do you believe that the President will decide that he is able to make the adjustments to Turkey's terrorism laws that he needs to do in order for visa liberalisation to be agreed on the European side?
that's probably a bit early to tell. I think what we need to do is now let the dust settle a bit, wait for the AK party congress, see who's going to be the new prime minister, see how the new government will be constituted, what that means for what they can do with us. As far as the European Commission is concerned, we have an agreement. We stick to our side of the agreement. We want to continue working on that. I would applaud the day that we can open chapters 23 and 24 so that we can start talking about the rule of law, about the way journalists are treated, about the independence of the judiciary, about human rights. Those are the things we need to be talking about. If Turkey is serious about coming closer to the European Union, it will have to do some very, very major reforms, because on the field of human rights, the rule of law, the treatment of journalists, we are drifting apart. We're not coming closer together.
Thank you. Mr. Desir, maybe I can ask you for some reflections on the fallout from this crisis for European unity. It seems to me there's a sort of strange contradiction here. There is an almost inexorable logic that would drive you towards a need for cooperation at the European level. This is very clearly a European problem. It's not a problem that any one or two countries should have to deal with on their own. And yet, it seems to have had, this crisis seems to have had the power to drive European countries apart more than anything else that we've seen for a long, long time. So is there a way to break through this? How can we come up with some new sort of compact in which those countries that haven't been directly affected by the crisis, because refugees don't want to go there, can get involved in relieving some of the burden on those countries that are on the front line of this crisis?
Well, first, it's clear that it's at the same time a test of credibility for our citizens, a test of solidarity among the member states, a test of our value regarding the challenge of asylum right and refugee. Probably the problem is that we are now confronted to issues of security, of control of the border, and the refugee crisis is not only an issue of security, of course, it's also an issue of human value. But those issues are becoming first in the view of citizens, and European Union has not been built to deal with those issues. Because of history, European Union has been built on economic cooperation. We have built a common market, common agriculture policy, a common currency for some member states. And now it's clear that if we are not able to bring a common European answer to these security challenges and to the refugee crisis, we will not have the support of European citizens. And we have seen how it feeds the populism in each of our country, and how it creates tension among member states depending on their exposition to the crisis and their situation. One of the reasons is also that we have built something we are very attached of, which is a free area of movement, the Schengen area, without a real means and mechanism of control of the external border. Theoretically, it was existing, it was in the text, but in practice, it was just up to each member state to deal with it. And when a member state was confronted to a strong crisis, we have seen this first with Hungary, then with Greece, or with Italy, even before Greece, in Lampedusa, for example, it was clear that there was not a European mechanism. So I think that with time, with the European Council meeting, with the effort of the European Commission, especially of Vice President Frans Timmermans, with the GHE Council and the decision of our Minister of Interior, we have built a common answer. Now we have to implement it. We have a problem which is a classical problem of the European Union. Time is running. I mean, we are very slow. We have to decide at 28, with 28 parliament, and the globalization issues, the security issue are not waiting for our answer, and the citizens are worrying. So now we have to implement very strongly all this decision. We have to adopt the proposed legislation on the common border coast and border control. We have to reform the Schengen and the Dublin system. We have to find a compromise among us. And we have also to apply the solidarity mechanism of relocation and also the mechanism of legal reinstallation of a part of the Syrian refugee from Turkey as an alternative to the illegal migration. And the deal with Turkey is a part of all this, because it's clear that we can't have a decent policy regarding the control of migration if we don't have an asylum part of it, if we don't accept a part of the refugee, if we don't help those countries who are the one who receives the most refugee, is Turkey, but also Lebanon, Jordan. And if we don't have a more global common migration policy, especially with African countries. Because if you look at the people coming from Libya, they come, perhaps some of them from dictature, but they come also from Eastern African or Western African or Sahel African country for economic reasons. And we had a summit with the African leader. But it's clear that we will have to have a real African-European strategy, a new Africa-Europe common partnership on development. It can be an opportunity. Today, Africa is viewed as a risk. Tomorrow, we could make of Africa a European project because they need a lot of our technology, of our capital for infrastructure, for energy, for education. And it's a very fast-growing continent. It could be a huge opportunity if we can transform what is a crisis in a cooperation in the future.
So something like the Italians recently proposed, for example, with their migration compact.
Absolutely. There was a discussion about the way to finance it, because Italians made a very bold proposal of creating a kind of euro bonds.
The Germans don't like that word very much.
Yes, we know some member states don't like it. But, well, if we don't like this proposal, we can think about another proposal. We have found other way of financing our cooperation with Turkey, for example. We have to imagine something, but it's clear that, up to me, it's a huge challenge, but it can also help us to become a more mature continent. I think it was not sustainable in the long term to think that Europe could be a strong cooperation, regional cooperation entity without a strong external policy, without a strong cooperation policy, without a strong security policy, and perhaps also without growing in the common defense policy, in link with NATO, of course. But it's clear that we are surrounded, in a way, by the most important international crisis, except North Korea. And we have to deal with it. I mean, nobody will deal with it instead of us. Of course, we will cooperate with the US and with our partners in NATO about it. But at the end of the day, Libya, what is happening in Mediterranean Sea, even Ukraine, it's more about our own responsibility. Yeah. So we have to organize ourselves.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned, I'm not sure you used the word, but I think you were referring to the possibility of mass resettlement from the region, Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon. That's something I'd like us to get back to a little bit later in the discussion. That's a major part of the Turkey deal that no one is even really talking about at the moment. We can get onto that in a bit later. Mr. Polenz, I thought it might be interesting to ask you for some reflections on the effects of this crisis on East-West relations within Europe. I think perhaps a lot of people thought, in a sort of Francis Fukuyama-type way, that the accession of most of the countries of Eastern Europe to the European Union in 2004-2007 represented the sort of the final stage of the spread of liberal European ideas. And what a lot of people say now is that what we've learned over the course of the last year is that that is very much not true. And the division and the cleavage seems a lot stronger than a lot of people had expected. How does it look to you, and do you think that there is a way of overcoming this division?
First, if you look a bit closer to this point, you would easily see that, for instance, the Estonian approach to the topic is much different from the Hungarian or from the Polish approach. So I would not just say East versus West, but are we able to design a European approach? Because the first point is, I think we have to be clear of the dimension of the problem. We have some 500 million people north of the Mediterranean living in democracies, more or less welfare and secure. And we have some 400 million people southern of the Mediterranean living in terror, war, civil war, with some islands of stability. And both people are living inside due to internet and smartphones. And this describes the problem. And the next point is, what are our goals? What kind of goals do we have? At the moment, it is very much focused on only reducing the numbers of refugees. I think this is too short-sighted. We have also to have the goal to avoid that so many refugees are dying in the Mediterranean. And we have also the goal to fulfill our legal commitments to Geneva Convention and so on. If you describe the goals this way, you come immediately to the conclusion that the whole task is really a European and not something we can cope with on a more or less national basis. And this was the difference, or this is a discussion within the European Union, what has happened with the Austrian closing of the border, with Hungarian closing of the border. And this shows us that we can either keep our policy or get to a common asylum and refugee and migration policy, or we will skip the Schengen Agreement. There's nothing in between. And the Schengen Agreement is not just for a nice trip in our holidays without showing our passport. It is of key importance for our economy. Imagine for a moment Germany would do what, let's say, Hungary has done. Germany is now a big transition country. And we have in our industries this just-in-time delivery of supplement things, and so on and so on. So it would be an economic and political disaster. And therefore, we need a common approach to control our external borders. And in this case, the Dublin agreements were not enough. We have to take this as a common European task, which means that it's not just up to the periphery countries to protect their border with non-European Union neighbors, but it should be a common European task. Second, I think we need desperately a common policy vis-à-vis asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants. And we have to deal with this close to our external borders. And finally, it comes to the point how to finance it. And in my view, it has to be financed from the household of the European community, because it is a European thing. And
do you mean the EU budget?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I mean the European budget, because this gives us the opportunity and the possibility to tell the countries, the 28 countries, if you take refugees, you get some 10,000, 15,000 euros per year per capita. And this might also change the perception of how to cope with this problem. And of course, you cannot say, and this was the mistake of keeping such a long time with Dublin, and Germany did as well. We also refused to have a common approach to these issues until 2015, because we said we are fine. We are in the midst of Europe. It's not our problem. We take care from the Frankfurt airport, and that's it. This was the German position. Even if we had seen that in 2014 we had 200,000 people crossing the Mediterranean, we had 8,000 at least people dying, which underlines the seriousness of the problem. We could see that in Syria we have 8 million refugees, 4 million outside the country. We could see that Turkey had some 2.x million refugees. Lebanon, the small, tiny Lebanon, 1.2 million refugees. This would mean in per capita relations, Germany had to take 20 million refugees, just to imagine. And this is my final remark. I think in our first panel we had so many discussions about leadership. I think we have to explain to our people that we should not be afraid of this topic. We are in Germany 82 million people. If Germany takes 1 million refugees, like we have done last year, this means, and I wanted to have this kind of flash mob in my city. I wanted to have 800 people coming to our central marketplace, and I would put 10 people aside of them. And this would, and then I would take a picture of that. And this would mean the relationship between refugees and the population. And we are much too reluctant to do it in this way. We are now running after the populists and trying to explain and excuse, and this is a huge mistake. I think we can cope with that if we are explaining it in the right way to our people.
That leads very neatly to a question that I wanted to put to Mr. Pabriks. You were saying that it's clear that there cannot be national solutions to this, but I think you also put your finger on it when you said that for Germany, before last year, to a large degree, people were prepared to say, well, this is someone else's problem. We're not on the front line of this. Other countries can deal with this, and there are various European rules that ensure that they have to deal with it. Now, that is very clearly no longer the prevailing mode of thought in Germany, but I think it is the prevailing mode of thought in plenty of other countries. So for those countries, if I can ask you, Mr. Pabriks, for those countries that are not on the front line of this crisis, and probably never will be, or not for a long time, because essentially refugees don't want to go there, is it sensible to come up with these sort of burden-sharing mechanisms that the Commission proposes, including fines for countries, or solidarity contributions, I think they're called, for countries that don't accept refugees? Or are there perhaps smarter, more innovative ways that we could go about thinking about sharing the burden across the European Union?
Okay, thank you for asking this very sensitive question, because it's about sense and sensibility, and I promise you I will not lie, but I will not be very politically correct either. And I would say, first of all, I think that attitudes in EU countries, as we can see, vary very much. We can take such an Eastern European countries like Finland and Estonia, which are one way, and we have Lithuania and maybe Poland and Hungary and others, and we have France and of course Southern Europe. And I mentioned here Finland, first of all, because I think we are feeding prejudice here very much. Once we read also German media or some other media, and they speak about those Eastern Europeans, those evil people who do not want here any migrant and refugee, and who are, you know, already, but this is in media what I'm reading. Yeah. And I'm reading German media basically every day. Now, secondly, once we are speaking about solidarity, then I would like to not to use here the cherry picking, because if we speak about solidarity, then where we did see that solidarity 3 and 4 years ago more globally, once we came to Syria crisis, didn't we see that this war is developing like this? Didn't we see what is happening in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan before? But until those poor people did not start to swim across the Aegean, nobody cared about solidarity. And I'm not speaking just about the internal EU solidarity. So from that perspective, I'm basically happy that we are slowly starting to wake up, that we see that migration crisis, in essence, is not a migration crisis, but this is an initial crisis of our foreign and security policy, where we have been proving that staying silent and not making decisions actually costs more than making decisions, because we did not make decisions neither in Europe nor across the Atlantic in Washington. And this is a common Western our responsibility. And now we're paying price for this. The second thing is, and here I have to, sorry, but I have to put also the stone in the garden of some of our colleagues in EU. I remember when I was foreign minister in 2005 and 2006, how we were dealing with Turkey. Then we were proud enough to tell these guys in Turkey that, look, no matter what you do, no matter you pass test or not, you will not become a member of European Union. Now, 10 years passed, I think we contributed also to the rise of Erdogan, however he is. Now we pay the price and we go to Ankara And we're begging.
Can I just ask who said that precisely, what you now say?
Nicolas Sarkozy said that Turkey is a country in Asia Minor.
Merkel, Austria.
We're talking about the 2004 decision of the European Council. That's the basis for
No, I'm
dealing with Turkey.
I'm talking about nation-state government decisions. Here.
Unfortunately, he is right.
About referenda, etc. That was what was decided. But what you say that people were saying, whatever you do, you will never become member. That's simply not the situation.
Well, it is actually because Madame Merkel, which is a member of my party, a coalition, actually she told us there will be this priority relationship. And I compare this referendum in country like something like my son is going for university and willing to pass an exam. He's passing exam criteria, let's say Copenhagen criteria, and then the rector is telling, listen, well, you passed exam, but now we'll ask other students do they like you. And I think it was not a correct decision. It was not a correct decision. Now, once we are speaking about current proposals, I have a biased views here. Because if we are looking to this suggestion of Commission about Border and Coast Guard Agency, I actually say it's close to great suggestion. And I'm happy that finally we are not doing what we did some year ago or 2 years ago, where as Latvians would say we were putting horse on another side of the carriage. Because we should start step by step. Foreign policy, security policy, cooperation with Turkey, clear borders, and then we can start to speak about those migrants or asylum seekers who we are and how we spread solidarity here. Because if I'm looking from the initial suggestions, we are coming first with ideas that we are welcoming and we are opening borders. And it's clear that Schengen cannot survive if outside borders are open. It doesn't work. We cannot keep borders out open and borders in open. It simply doesn't work. If I'm hearing, actually, this is from media, sorry if I'm mistaken, if I'm here that Bundesnachrichtendienst, one of people is telling, look, I did not think that a year ago among migrants might be also some, let's say, security threats to us. Then I was wondering, what did he do in August and September last year? Because I wrote at that time an article and I was telling, look, these people should have sleepless nights when these masses of people are crossing the border. And by this, I'm not trying to demonize the migrants, because 99% are nice people there, probably. But we should not exclude that there will be problems. We were undermining our security by this. We don't know what kind of people are where and who they are. We need this register. So from that perspective, of course, the initiative of Commission about Border and Coast Guard Agency is a good initiative, correct initiative, and differently from the suggestions about fair change of Dublin or distribution of migrants, this is actually which unites the countries, and that's a positive. So we have to start to unite the countries with decisions with whom we can unite, and then step forward, and not to start with something which is offending and which is difficult to accept. Just to finish, I'll tell about criteria. Now the things have been improving, but once we are speaking about change of Dublin and distribution of asylum seekers between countries, the initial idea was per capita and size. With size, we could understand the size of territory too in former times. So what, Finland with 5 million people, and with this territory would take 1 million now? Would that be fair? Or look at Baltic countries. We had a tremendous immigration without control in Soviet time. 30% of our population came from Soviet time and is not yet integrated. Now, this is not a criteria. Of course, if I will go back to my people and I will tell, look, Brussels are willing to put a fine on you if you are not taking asylum seekers in your village. We will get simply the next Brexit in a year. That will be the consequence. So let's be careful with proposals which can initiate already such a tremendous harm to EU. Because for us here, Tallinn, Riga, Vilnius, European Union, differently from Netherlands, France, and Germany, is existential value. We need it, and we need it stronger. Thank you.
But just to be clear, if I understood you correctly, I think your problem was with one of timing. You were suggesting that what we need to be working on now are proposals like the European Border and Coast Guard, these sorts of common solutions that everyone can get behind, and the sorts of ideas that the Commission has recently been proposing for burden sharing, solidarity contributions, and so forth. We postpone those to the future until the situation has got under control, or not? Because if you don't start talking about situations like that, then there are plenty of countries who are going to say, well, we're doing a lot. What are they doing?
Look, I am not supporting basically the approach of some EU countries which are telling zero, no, we do not participate. You know that Baltic countries actually have been without hesitations telling first 160,000, we take our share, we take them, fine. But I think there are a number of levels. First of all, I am not certain that in this stage, when there is so many unclear matters regarding security, foreign policy, outside border security, etc., we are ready to give a sovereign decision about distribution of asylum seekers to the central authorities. I don't think we are ready for that. If this is imposed to a number of countries because they're smaller, weaker, or more poor, perhaps with force you can get it through. But then I will refer to what Mr. Timmermans was telling earlier before the dinner, that tradition of European Union and European tradition, political tradition, was that we, first of all, obey to the law. And this differentiates us from Russians or from somebody else. Now here, we know that EU consistent tradition was consensus. Now we are moving from consensus to majority vote. And in some places also nationally, once we look at TTIP or CETA or other trade issues, we are moving actually from representative democracy to the direct democracy. And I see this as a fundamental danger for future of European Union.
Okay, on that cheerful note.
Doesn't make sense.
Minister, perhaps I can get your perspective on what this crisis tells us about European foreign policy. What it's done well, what it hasn't done well. Well, we're regularly told now that we should have seen this crisis coming. It was obvious. There were millions of refugees in Turkey and Jordan and Lebanon on our doorstep. Why wouldn't they come here? Rather easy to say that in hindsight. Can we draw any lessons from this crisis about what sort of approach we should take to troubled countries in our neighborhood in future, even from the self-interested perspective of stopping their problems from appearing on our doorstep?
Well, thank you for that question. I have many thoughts about those reflections before, but I'll stick to the question, and I'll come to the questions raised later. I think that we have learned already a lot. And I've been foreign minister now for less than a year, so I've been in 7 or 8 council meetings. But even in the council meetings, we have moved from shaming and blaming each other to understanding that we can be successful only if we cooperate. First lesson. Second lesson, what we have learned, we can't talk about separately development policy, trade policy, development cooperation policy, foreign policy, but we have to have very common approach and very complex approach. The fact that there are 70 million refugees in the world today shows that not only ours, but overall development cooperation policy hasn't been successful. We're doing lots of things, but the crisis is still there. So I think that what has happened in recent months, I very much agree with what has been said about the agreement deal with Turkey. We support it. And we need agreements like that with other countries who are in crisis at the moment. Northern African countries, we need to approach them case by case, look into the matters, what is behind the crisis, what is where we can help them, what is what they want from us, and have deals with them.
Would you include Libya?
I'm sorry?
Would you include Libya?
I will include Libya as soon as they have government. That's a partner. But in principle, all the countries with whom we do have at the moment who are undergoing different levels of crisis. And why not to look at our trade policy? We're talking about coming from Estonia, very liberal market policy, trade policy. Why shouldn't we open our markets to African countries? So we do have some tools in different toolkits, and we have to use them comprehensively. We have to use them together, and we could be much more successful.
There are some people who work in development agencies, including within the European Union, who are very wary about the sort of approach that you've just been describing, which is obviously gaining traction in policy circles. Development is, for some people, is supposed to be depoliticized. It's supposed to be a process by which we encourage and we help developing countries to grow regardless of whatever their political situation is, regardless of what the nature of our political relationship with them is. But you're talking about a very different approach. It's essentially a politicization of development. Encourage, work with countries to develop, but that's the flip side of a more cooperative approach to migration.
I think that one does not exclude another. Yes, I understand the principles of development cooperation, why we do it, why we want to promote those countries, why we're assisting those countries, why we're fighting poverty in those countries, why we're fighting for education in those countries. I understand everything. But where are we today with that development cooperation? Which means we haven't been so successful as we could have been. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think we have to be very pragmatic, we have to be very realistic, and we have to start negotiating with each and every country. And after Valletta, I've seen that there is much more interest and there is much more political will from Federica, from other foreign ministers, and from foreign policy leaders to talk to specific countries, to go to the root causes and start assisting with the root causes, but also asking them to assist us with readmission agreements, or doing what is in our interest, in our interest meaning European interests.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I want to raise the resettlement issue, and in fact, maybe I can start with Minister Desir on this. Every European country has a quota of refugees that is supposed to accept under various proposals that the European Commission has put forward. But separately from this, there have been initiatives led, I think, by the Germans and the Dutch to advance mass resettlement schemes, taking refugees directly from the region in an organized fashion, perhaps working with the UNHCR, and bringing them to Europe. Create regular flows to stop the irregular flows is the thought process. Now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your Prime Minister has made it clear that at this stage France is not prepared to take any more people than it would otherwise have taken under the relocation quota. And that means that France would not be in the vanguard of a mass resettlement on this issue. Can you give us some insights into what the French thinking is on this? And does France believe that mass resettlement of refugees needs to be one part of Europe's refugee strategy?
Well, I want to correct your impression because, no, we have two commitments. It's mainly about what we call relocation, which means people, refugees who are now in Greece or in Italy. But even under the European agreement that was took last July, there is also commitments to resettle people from Turkey.
Yes, but very small numbers in that agreement.
The total figure for France of these commitments is 30,000 people for the 2 coming years. It includes also resettlement from Turkey and possibly from Lebanon and Jordan. And we will respect this commitment, and the Prime Minister confirms that. Prime Minister Manuel Valls says that we will have to respect this commitment, because I think what was told by Marina is very important by my colleague, because we have learned from this crisis that it's not blaming and shaming, it's about cooperation. It's the only way to deal with it. We need a European answer. Otherwise, if we are not able to prove that it's more efficient to deal with it at European level, so what is the alternative? It's each country trying to control the refugee and the migration crisis. At the end of the day, it's clear that it means first the end of Schengen, second inefficiency. Because Marina is right, we have to deal with the root causes. We have to deal with the transit and origin country. It's clear that it's not possible to have 28 different deals with Turkey, 28 different strategies regarding Ivory Coast, Senegal, or Eritrea, or Sudan, or Libya. So the only way to deal efficiently with this is to deal it at European level, to have a comprehensive deal, to have a global approach, to deal at the same time the issue of border control, which I agree with the member of the European Parliament, it's absolutely key. The issue of solidarity and repartition of the refugee, resettlement and relocation, and the issue of cooperation with the country of origin or the third country of transit. And that's the way we want to do it. And a part of it is to respect our commitments toward our European partners. I agree that we have to do it through a consensus. We have to adopt this decision by a common will of all the EU member states. Nobody can oblige the member state to do something you don't want to do. It's the same in this issue, but it's the same in economic policy, where we have common rules. The European Commission doesn't have an army to oblige the EU member state to respect the law on internal market or the law on refugee. But we accept to respect the law. You accept to respect the common decision, even if sometimes we are not happy with the compromise, we are not happy, but it's a compromise because we think at the end of the day it's in our common interest and it's also in our national interest. Mm-hmm. And the refugee crisis, for me, it's absolutely clear that even if it's very difficult to take the decision, it's absolutely clear that it's impossible to have national answers which are real efficient. It's clear also, and I agree with it, that the citizen will only support this policy if it shows it is efficient. And I think the deal with Turkey has avoided a lot of drama. It has bring to a decrease of the flow of refugees. There is less drawing in the sea. Of course, it will depend on the fact that Turkey will respect all its part of the agreement, but it's in our interest to respect our commitments, and it's also in our, it's a duty to respect our commitments regarding relocation from Greece and Italy, especially from Greece, because the border of the Balkan country are closed, and that there is more than 50,000 people in Greece coming from Turkey, and that we cannot say it's just up to Greece to deal with this situation. We have a duty of solidarity with an EU member state, and I've been there, like France, have been visiting camp in Greece. They do their best to provide support to this refugee, but we have to do a repartition of all those who have the right to be recognized as refugee, and the others, we have to organize the readmission with their country of origin.
Mm. Thank you. I just want to stick on this resettlement issue for a moment. Maybe, Mr. Vice President, if I can ask you, last year, when everybody in Europe was consumed by the problem of the flows and how to stem the flows and how to manage this chaotic situation, you were vocal on a number of occasions about the need not to forget the resettlement piece of this. Now that the flows, at least for now, seem to have calmed down, is there any political energy in Europe left for a mass resettlement effort? I mean, the Turkey deal, the EU-Turkey deal, includes a clause, the voluntary humanitarian admission scheme, that says that once the flows have become, I think, manageable in a sustained way is the wording, I think, then we will begin looking into this. And yet I don't hear anyone talking about this. What's going to happen? What happens next?
Well, it will be very silly to assume that because the flows are low now, you can forget about the other parts of the deal. There are up to almost 3 million refugees in Turkey today. A quarter of the population of Lebanon is refugees. We talked earlier about the amount of refugees in Jordan. Most of these people, and when you go to the camps, almost everyone will tell you, if you ask them, what do you really want? All of them will tell you, we want to go home. We need to make that possible, ending the war, etc., but we need to make their lives acceptable before they can go home. The more we do for them in their own region, the easier it will, first it's cheaper, but also the easier it will be for them to go home.
Absolutely.
So my top priority is to mobilize more and more funds to provide for decent lives for people in Jordan, in Lebanon, and in Turkey. This is what we should be doing at a much higher level than we are doing today. But even then, I believe it is our moral duty to also go into those areas, select people according to UNHCR rules, and bring them to Europe in a legal way if there are not better circumstances for them in Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan. And to simply forget about this part will lead to the unraveling of the deal, because the Turks have said very clearly, And I fully understand and support that point. We will not become your refugee camp. And they are right to say that. And we should take our responsibility. We should take it fully. And this applies also to relocation. And I really want to insist on this point. Why are we doing a revision of Dublin? Because Italy and Greece felt they were forced to apply a way through policy, because even after years of saying, don't leave us on our own, nobody did anything for them.
Right.
So I can have some understanding that they say, okay, we have been asking for help. You don't want to give it? Here are the refugees. We need to stop that. If we want to maintain an internal market, if we want to maintain Schengen, this needs to be stopped. The only element that will help stop that, if we have an emergency mechanism, if one or several member states are completely overwhelmed in a crisis by refugees. Which means that then you need to trigger pan-European solidarity. If that is not an element of the Dublin revision, there's no point in a Dublin revision. And I gladly listen to anyone who has a brilliant idea about solidarity. But the brilliant idea is not no, 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 because if you say yes, we will leave the EU. That's not a brilliant idea, I would argue. And solidarity is not an à la carte thing. And this, I really want to give this warning. It's not a threat. It's my own experience after working for more than a quarter of a century in the EU. If other member states plead with member states, we have a serious problem and we need you to help us solve it. And the answer is no, for all sorts of reasons. We don't like Muslims in our country, we heard this or that. The answer is no. Then at some point, solidarity will be asked of those countries, of the other countries. And then I guarantee you the answer will also be no. Even if that will hurt the country that says no. And if we reach that point, and this is the point where the populists want us to go, we can forget about the European Union. So we are talking about existential matters here. And it is too easy, it is too lazy to simply say, no, we need to think about it. We give the Commission better options then. We have said, either you have solidarity by taking numbers, or you show solidarity to help pay for the way refugees are treated in another country.
Exactly.
And then say, oh, ridiculous, we don't want it. Give me an alternative then. I have heard nothing. But no, no, no is not going to solve any problem.
The logic of the position is completely clear as you describe it, but the concern in a lot of the countries that I think you're referring to is that this is essentially solidarity by diktat from Brussels, or as some have even put it, multiculturalism by diktat from Brussels. And so what some of the people on that side of the argument may say, perhaps I'm not the best person to speak for them, is that if you're trying to enforce solidarity in the European Union, then what you're talking about is not solidarity at all.
But it's very funny that the rule of law is invoked here. The rule of law means respect for the treaty. And in the treaty, we take decisions either by unanimity or by qualified majority voting. And then if you don't like the outcome of the qualified majority voting, you don't then come all of a sudden and say, no, no, now I want consensus because the vote didn't go my way. That's not the rule of law, with all due respect to the member of the European Parliament, who should know better about the rule of law. But the point here is this. This is not the solidarity we want to give because it is imposed on us. I guarantee you, with a review of the multi-annual financial framework, net payer countries, parliaments will say, we don't want this imposed solidarity paying for structural funds for other countries. That's going to be the reaction. And that's the last reaction I want.
Perfect.
Because it's bad for those countries, it's bad for the accession countries, it's bad for everyone. But if we are in a mode of not sharing solidarity, people will even take decisions in emotions that are against their own interest. And I want to avoid that at all costs. But sooner or later, if we don't find a way of showing solidarity in this refugee crisis, other accidents will happen. And that is what the Commission tries to avoid at all costs. This is why we try and find solutions out of this. And it will not help us by just saying no to everything and just saying we can't do this, the population doesn't want. Every member state at some stage faces decisions that are not popular at home. But we have to defend them if they are necessary for the common good. Because the strength of the union is created by all member states together and not by individual member states.
I think our two Baltic colleagues wanted to respond to that.
That
Minister first, and then we'll...
I agree with almost everything Frans said. We believe in solidarity, and trust me, especially Estonians with our history. We felt it in 1940. What does it mean when there wasn't solidarity? And it concerned us very directly. But I also agree with what you were saying, that in some cases, the decisions on solidarity will not be popular ones. It's up to the politicians to explain to people why the one or another unpopular decision is needed to express solidarity. If we want solidarity with EU dealing with the security situation in the East, it's normal that we have to feel the same solidarity when discussing migration crisis. But here comes but. The solidarity, I agree, no is not answer. And that's why at least my country tries to be constructive. And we want to have a word or the right to say in those cases. We don't want to see automatic, mechanical quotas and distributions. We want more power to member states and to council. Because we've seen what Commission did last year with the first quotas that we introduced. We're talking about solidarity. I would argue that Commission didn't show much solidarity towards member states.
But it was a council decision.
So
it was not a Commission decision. It was a council decision.
But we needed much more engagement of member states. And we remember that. And that's why we want to be more engaged. We want to be more consulted. And that's why we're proposing not automatic click and it goes, but discussion with member states and member states' ownership, more ownership on making the decision. But I completely agree with you. No is not an answer.
Just very specifically on Estonia. Estonia last year, said to us, hey, the mechanism you propose is very punitive for a small country like Estonia. And that was a form of engaging with us. And we said, okay, you're right, we need to correct that. And we corrected that. That is a form of cooperation that works very positively for both sides, if you do it like that.
Exactly.
Mr. Pabriks, and then I think maybe we can begin a Q&A after that.
Well, first of all, it's clear that Commission is not the only decision maker here anyway. We know that. And I'm not trying here to put the European Parliament on the top, believe me. Now, secondly, we all are sensible people, and we are sensible countries. And of course, once we sit in the armchair, either with wine or with Nuttall or something else, we can find a deal. But proposals which are sometimes coming, I don't know from where are they coming. They not always sound very sensible, and they sound frequently arrogant, and they sound like coming from somebody who simply has a power to decide. And I would put here a number of things why it makes me really upset, because I'm coming from a small, poor country, and I basically, since I did my PhD in Denmark, I have been always facing somebody who either was overwhelmed by ignorance or not knowing our history, our understanding of solidarity, and our life problems before that. So I know what does it mean to be a second or third class citizen in the European Union, believe me. Now, once I speak about what is popular now, holistic solution, it's nice if we are taking out the issue about migration and solidarity here, but I would like to hear also good proposals about our foreign policy. I would like to, we cannot fix those mistakes we did 3, 4, or 10 years ago, but at least how do we see that approach from European Union side? How do we think that, for instance, it's very nice to go on the street and see that 3 other people are beating up the one person, and then once they finish their dirty work, then we go there and with all the fundamental rights in pocket, we bring this person to hospital. I think that it's much nicer once we see that somebody's beaten up to stop that guy immediately. And we did not do that. And nobody in the European Union were doing this. And once we speak about solidarity about asylum seekers and migrants, it's fine. But we should also remember that such countries as the Baltic states were paying with our lives in many, many different missions where other European Union countries had a caveat where they even could not save our soldiers when they were under the fire. And that is a problem where we should speak about solidarity. And finally, if I'm going back to my voters in poor Latvian or Estonia or some other countryside, and I will tell them in current circumstances, look, we have here a proposal from Commission. Either you agree on permanent quotas, taking in your village 50 people each year, which is decided in centralized way and which is not asking your own national government, or you will pay a fine and you will not a government. Do you know what answer I will get in 99%? You know, take your European Union and go 3 houses further from here. That will be the answer. And that is very, very serious. So I am the one who really wants European Union to prevail and to come to senses and sit in the armchair and find a deal. But at this moment, that deal, which is coming regarding the Dublin and which is regarding the quotas on migration, is not sensible enough.
Can I just to correct a few things? We don't decide. It's
Briefly,
the Parliament
briefly.
and the Council that decides. It's not the Commission that decides.
Yes, I know that. Fine.
Mr. Polenz,
I
be brief
just
and then we can go to the
add
audience.
very shortly. I think it is a wrong understanding of solidarity if you define solidarity doing something for others. You are doing, we are trying to get to a common approach to asylum and migrants on our self-interest. And in a sound analysis, and if you think through what it would mean if you would not have this kind of solidarity within the European Union, then think this through. And you described parts of the outcome. If every country would try to cope with this problem on its own, we will first skip Schengen, and we are not sure that we could stop this process of disintegration just with Schengen. And so it's like wrapping a pullover when you draw, and then we don't know what would be left. And I would argue in a different way with your constituencies. I would, of course, not refer to the European decision-making processes. I would tell them, first, we have the European Union providing peace and security for its member states.
Are they?
Yes. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. We have preserved peace in the European Union for 70 years now.
I would put NATO first now.
Yeah,
That's another discussion.
Yeah, it's another discussion. Second, it is also good for our welfare and our economic system due to the common market. And the third point is, and this is more for many a new one, it is our answer to globalization. And this is not as well understood as the first 2 points. And if you, especially in the Baltic states, could easily tell your constituents in a more or less more and more multipolar world, will we cope as Baltic states with Russia, with China, with the others, or will we cope as the European Union with them? And then you would get the answer, of course, it's better as a European Union. And this requires that we keep the Union together. And then you have an overwhelming roof where you can then sell some parts which are not so popular. If you are not discussing the whole building, and if you are only describing very narrowly what is unpopular, then of course the people will say, go away. But you have to make clear that in this point, really the European Union and its coherence is at stake.
Okay, I think maybe we can turn to the audience. 3 requests. Please be brief, say who you are, and please don't remain fixated on this sort of internal solidarity relocation issue, because there's a lot more to this issue than that. We had a question here in the front, and then we'll go over there. We got a mic. I think we got a mic coming. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Catherine Royal. I work for NATO, but I'm not talking as NATO. I'm just talking as an individual person who gets a vote in the Brexit very soon. I would just like to congratulate Frans Timmermans in mentioning the word Muslim, because I don't see that we can have this conversation without actually saying who the refugees are. They're not all refugees. Refugees isn't right. It's migrants we're talking about, because I think we all feel solidarity with refugees without any question. Migrants and economic migrants is a different question. And I think it's unfair to all of us as members of the public to mix them up, because it's different things. We spoke in the discussion before dinner about values and European values. The problem that is posed by the migrant debate is that, in fact, an awful lot of European citizens feel that European values have been eroded without their consent by the immigration of an awful lot of people who have a different value set. And if you look at a country like mine, which has lived as a multicultural country for a long time, very successfully, that's fine, but we have now reached a point where we have a group of migrants who have come in who do not want to integrate, who do not accept our values. And that is what this migration debate is about. It's not about solidarity with people who are fleeing war. I don't think that's an issue at all. I think it is a problem of taking in a large number of people who do not accept the values of our societies, who do not want to integrate, and who actually want to live a separate life inside our country, and that is eroding our countries and our European values. And the problem that the electorate has with our political leaders is, and I don't want to, this sounds awfully rude, I suppose it is really, is that our politicians are not even addressing this point. And the fact that we haven't discussed it, and it's been not mentioned throughout a debate, throughout two serious conversations here, illustrates that we don't want to touch it. The electorate want this to be addressed. They want it to be discussed, that we still want to live with our values, and we want this to be discussed as part of a migration debate.
Thank you. Maybe we can take one or two more and then go back to the panel. And a gentleman over here in the back standing up.
Thank you. Randy Schoeneman, foreign policy consultant, Washington, D.C. I just give you a little bit of an American perspective on this, European navel-gazing on relocation and resettlement. We've been going through this debate for at least 10 years, if not 30 years. And our elites ignored concerns about illegal immigration. They ignored it for the last 10 years, and what we have as a result, they ignored debates about border security, it's interesting. I've heard very little discussion about border security. They ignored it, and what we have in the end is Donald Trump as the Republican nominee. That's the issue that he rode to the top of the nomination. That's the issue that everybody is defensive about. So in every migration crisis, and I agree with the previous commentator, why are we calling this Europe's refugee politics? Some small percentage of these migrants might be refugees, but you don't know. There's a push factor, there's a pull factor. The push factor is what's going on in Syria, and to a lesser degree, what's going on in Libya. Europe has done nothing about security in Syria. They did nothing after helping the US lead from behind to depose Gaddafi. So you have complete states in crisis, and you've done nothing about the absolute push factors why these people want to leave. Until you do that, you will not solve the problem. Second, there's the pull factor. Open borders. And you had open borders. When Orban first defended Schengen borders, there was shock from the EU. Shock. How dare he put up a fence? Now, Macedonia is defending Schengen borders. Final point, Turkey. For 55 years, the EU has been talking to Turkey and dangling membership. Now they're actually going to do something on the mess that they have on their borders. And the EU is talking about, we don't like your counterterrorism policies against the Kurds that are blowing up Turks. So all I have to say is, if you want Le Pen and the AfD in power, keep it up.
Well, okay, thank you. I'm not sure that's exactly the impetus behind Turkey's terrorism legislation, but perhaps the panel might have something to say. We'll take one more, this gentleman here, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Okay. Alan Riley, Atlantic Council. 3 brief points. I would argue, probably with the 2 other speakers from the floor, that we have failed largely to get to grips with this. It's the usual Brussels European political failure to be able to actually concretize how to deal with our problems. Bringing in very large numbers of migrants into Europe is going to create, as suggested, a large number of political problems across the whole of the Union and activate the nationalistic base, which we've already seen. What I don't understand is there are solutions. I mean, if Jean Monnet could be brought here, he would say, why don't you deploy the single market? In the sense that you create a series of enterprise zones within the region, you create a point of attraction, free movement of goods, services and capital, but not labour. You create, with development funds as well, you can actually create a point of attraction for refugees and migrants rather than coming into the Union. You create a border policy which doesn't focus on the actual borders, but the seas, where it's much easier to create an EU jurisdiction and also deal with trafficking. And more fundamentally of all, and this is my 3rd point, and this is the issue about being crunchy and really dealing with the problem, the British and the French, the principal military powers in Europe, and responsible in many ways for the design of the region, surely they should lead a European force to expel ISIS from part of Iraq and create a protectorate in which people can live safely. Because at the end of the day, as you said, they want to live at home. And we should do that. Well, this is the real crunchy dealing with the problem, rather than playing with these allocations of migrants and fines under some crazy European regulation. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the issue of integration/segregation over here. We have the security concern raised by the 2 last speakers, and the possibility of creating a European force to create safe areas in the Middle East. Who would like to tackle these very easy questions?
I would like to answer to the Muslim question. Yes, I know this is a widespread perception also in Germany. That, no. This is, and we all know in politics perception matters, of course. But what I would answer is, we have pluralistic societies. This means you can live in our societies with different values, different opinions, different religions. This is the core of Europe. What we have to expect, and what we do expect, is that the migrants obey to our law. And that's it. Obey to our law. They have not to share our values, because no, we have no common values in this sense. We have a common law, and they have to obey the law. It is, at least in my understanding. Second point, if you rely this kind of differences only to religion, I think it is wrong. It is cultural, it's economic, it's lack of modernization, and it's maybe also related to religion, but not only to religion. And I think it is very important to distinguish in this point, because if you say it is due to your religion that you cannot fit in our societies, then you express, if you are not converting, you cannot be member of our societies. This is behind all the arguments of our alternative for Germany, and this is also behind the arguments of Front National and others.
Okay.
They do not want to fit in.
No. It is, yes, there might be also some who will not, who say no. And here I think it is sufficient if we say you have to obey to our laws.
Okay. I think it's a very big question over labour market integration as well, but perhaps that's for another day. Please.
Yes, well, we are here really in this conference probably to promote more creative thinking and not to avoid the difficult issues. And I definitely agree with Mr. Polenz that EU has an immense value. And precisely because of this, I think me and many other people, they are really worried about number of these suggestions which are coming from different places, because they are without wish, but they are undermining actually that immense value, because they are creating for many people situation where their fears are not answered, where their questions are not answered, and where this is what is turning actually them into the hands of either radicals or populists who are against the European Union. Now in European Parliament we have maybe 25% of our MPs who are against the European Union actually. This is very unpleasant thing. But regarding the issue of migrants and immigration, of course, we are living in pluralistic society. But I remember from one of the previous Munich conferences and also from mass media that Chancellor Merkel and also Mr. Cameron, they were telling in more or less direct way, such multiculturalism like we understand is dead. It doesn't work. And what I want to continue with this sentence, that multiculturalism and respect to different collective values, because here we speak not about individual value, but about the collective value, is so far possible until it's not touching upon fundamental values in the host society. And at this moment, it's very difficult to compare part of these immigrants who are coming with that migration waves what we had either in Huguenot times or even during the Second World War, because here some part of fundamental values are touched upon, like for instance the equality of women. And you know, I will finish with a small joke, which is a truth in my view, what I think. Lately when I celebrated Easter at home, I decided for 2 of my teenagers to show a Monty Python movie, Life of Brian. Now, look, we have been living through painful history 400 years ago as a Christian society, killing thousands of fellow Christians to understand that there is a value of tolerance. We cannot from outside make the same thing happen in Islamic world. This world is going through huge changes. But until they will be incapable to produce their own Life of Brian, it will be very difficult to agree on fundamental rights.
Mr. Timmermans, what has the EU ever done for us?
First of all, I used that already once. Of course, we can never do better than NATO. Let me say that clearly. But my first remark is about the numbers, and perhaps some number crunching needs to be done in Washington, because we know precisely the people arriving from Turkey to Greece, where they're from, and the majority is really from Syria, Eritrea, and Iraq, and people flee actually from war. These are not economic migrants, these are people fleeing from war. These are facts, huh? We don't need to dispute the facts. Secondly, we did discuss actually this afternoon about fear in society and inclusive society and how you recreate a sense of community. And the proposition, and I heard it again, the proposition of some in Europe is to say you can only create a sense of community if you share all the values. Otherwise, you don't have a sense of community. Now, that is, in diverse societies like European societies, that is not a viable proposition.
Absolutely.
That's like proposing to unscramble scrambled eggs. It will not happen. It is much better to create a sense of community with openness towards people with differences, but with basic understanding of the rules of functioning of society. That is what we need to do. And I love to quote a recent event to a Brit who is opposed to this. Look at the mayor election in London. Look who was elected Lord Mayor of London. A son of Pakistani Indian refugees, a self-educated man, a self-made man, a real Londoner, a Liverpool supporter, and the Muslim. And there is no contradiction between all these things. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the future of European society. That is where we're heading. And people who refuse to accept that have their backs turned towards the future.
It's getting late, but I think there were 1 or 2 more questions. We started late. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I'd like to reflect to the things that you raised and we discussed, and I'll add one more thing. We have to take seriously the concerns of people.
Sure.
In Estonia, we have also conversations about different religious groups, different cultural groups moving to Estonia. We have conversations about the 500 plus whom we will receive in the 2 coming years. 500, yeah? In a regular year, we receive 6,000 foreigners. Half of them EU, half of them out of EU, which means that we already have Syrians, Iraqis, Iranians, we have them already in our societies, and they are part of our society. And nobody has noticed that. But now, when we're talking about 500 in 2 years, and we have special procedures, our police officers are interviewing them, our police officers are doing background checks, our police officers are convincing them that there is a country like Estonia, that they can come here and they can be safe here and they will be part of integration and they will learn the wonderful Estonian language and be part of Estonian culture, and we're afraid of them. But I don't agree that we can take easily or too lightly the concerns of people. They are concerned about security and they want to hear that we are doing refugees, we're receiving refugees, and at the same time we are protecting our borders, we're fighting against terrorism, we are accepting refugees, and economic migrants are coming under separate rules. So they want to see everything. They don't want the discussion only about the numbers, how many we are receiving. And by the way, we have received 20 out of 500 something, yeah? And with that number, we are in the top in the EU per capita.
I'm just going to very briefly abuse my prerogative and interject, because it seems to me we're talking about integration here. The discussion is very focused on values. But I think if there's one thing that we've learned from the post-war history of immigration in European countries is that the best motor of integration is having a job. Exactly. And we need to be able to find the jobs. And I think this is going to be a lot more difficult than people have suggested, particularly in countries like Germany and Sweden, with very large numbers of people. But that has to be where our efforts are directed first, that and language teaching. I think there was a question somewhere at the back over here. Yeah.
It's education, things like that.
Complex issue.
Hello. I was going to ask about what particular limits of this migration.
Can you tell us who you are?
Sorry. My name is Ognian Minchev. I'm a political scientist coming from Sofia, Bulgaria. I was going to ask what particular limits of this wave of newcomers to Europe, whether refugees or migrants, do you presume? But your last replies were actually meaning that there will be no limits. We will be societies, pluralistic societies, ready to accept everybody who's coming, and through this mechanism of solidarity, redirection, European societies will have to accept and adapt to their structures unlimited number of people, or at least a number of people that we don't know what kind of limit do they have. This is one thing. And second note, I would like to emphasize the fact that we are not talking this evening about particular countries in Europe who would not like to share solidarity with the others, but we are talking about a general tendency in most European countries in which growing number of people are dissatisfied with the migration policies that the present-day European Union is undertaking. And this reflects in the rising popularity of particular parties, of political formations, which are against the values that you have declared this evening here. Which means that if we claim that there are certain populist movements in Europe that we can define as illiberal democracies, we can probably speak about particular decision-making at the top of the European institutions, who could be defined as undemocratic liberalism.
Thank you very much. Do we have any final questions before we go back to the panel? Gentleman in the front. You just wait for the microphone.
My name is Javed Ludin, and I am from Afghanistan. I work in the private sector. I would like to go back to a question that was raised here, because I I think even though the panel covered both the symptom aspect of the refugee crisis as well as the root causes, and there were several references to that, but in as much as it's fascinating to see how much a detailed discussion in Europe here you have about the issue of the flow of migration, or whether you call it refugees or migrants, it's irrelevant. It's basically, I think one thing we understand is that conflict drives this process globally, whether they're migrants or they're refugees. And there is an added factor there as well, and that's organized crime, which is facilitating this process. So really, I would like to see, hopefully, at least, if not the same amount of, hot air, discussion. That
I'm sure that's not what you meant to say.
There's some rhetoric there about, that it has to be done. We have to go and address root causes and conflict and all that. But there is not nearly any concrete ideas on the table about how you could do that, how you would address the conflict aspect of this, because it is. Even if it was this recent issue here, the vast majority of the 1 million that came to Germany were from Syria and Afghanistan, from my country. So it's very obvious where the conflict in those two societies are coming from. So would there ever be, this is a question to at least whoever this panel could take it, how could Europe start a very serious discussion about addressing conflict in the Middle East? Generally, in the Greater Middle East.
Thank you. We'll go back to the panel, and I think this is probably where we'll wrap up. So if you all want to make some brief concluding remarks and address the questions from the last two speakers as well. Maybe we'll start with Vice President Timmermans.
First of all, I think the rise of populist movements is from way before the refugee crisis and is fundamentally linked with the feeling of social and economic disenfranchisement of the middle classes. I think that's where it comes from. Where is our future? Are our children going to be as well off as we are today? Those are very fundamental questions where there are not enough answers. And I echo what Wes Clark also said this afternoon. This is not about military might. This is about the economy. This is about creating perspective. This is about creating jobs. This is about making sure that people feel secure in their society in terms of also their economic and social position in the long run. Having said that, to answer very directly your question, of course Europe cannot take in all the refugees of the world without limits. Of course not. That is why we are working so hard at better protecting our borders, at making sure we do that collectively, at making sure that at the borders we distinguish between people who have the right to international protection and people who don't, that we finally make good agreements with countries of origin so that people who don't have the right to international protection are returned, that we provide those countries with, in line with the Italian Compact, with a perspective on development, that we start thinking in terms of developing the Mediterranean and Africa exactly in the same way as we have done before when we developed other parts of Europe. That is what we need to be doing, and that's going to be a costly affair, but the results of that could be very profitable because you create new markets, you create new opportunity, you create new interdependence. That is the way forward. But it's certainly not our ambition to say to the rest of the world, please come here. Having said that, I also want to repeat the remark I made earlier. The world, not Europe alone, but the world is becoming a more diverse place. People will be traveling, exchanging, going to other places, working for a while, studying, etc. That is a global development. And Europe is going to be part of that development. And embracing that development is going to create a lot of opportunity for us. It is not going to weaken us. It's going to make us stronger. I really believe that this is a global development that Europe can profit from in a very strong way.
Thank you. And just a mini factoid. It may feel like a lot of refugees came to Europe last year. The number of asylum seekers who reached Europe was less than the number of refugees that Lebanon, a country with roughly the population of Ireland, is hosting. 86% of the world's refugees are in the developing world, so sometimes it's useful to put these numbers in context. Please, Minister.
Yes, I think nobody says there's no limits. That's why we have so much emphasis on the control of external border. And I think that a part of the populist exploitation of the situation of last year was linked to the feeling that there was no control of the situation of migration. And that's why we have tried to build all this instrument and answer to this crisis. So we want, of course, a regulation, a control of the migration. It must be organized under rules. There is a distinction between those people who are refugees, because there is international convention, and economic migration. But even on economic migration, we need to have legal way as an alternative to smuggler trafficking and so on. But I want to say about value, about this very difficult discussion on integration, on the place of Muslim, of Islam in our society, that I don't think that in the future there will be such a possible choice for European country, but I agree with Frans Timmermans, for any country in the world, as either you are a country with immigration, either you choose not to be a country of immigration. Because except, again, if you are North Korea, it's not possible to say nobody will come to my country. You know, especially if you are a developed country, a democracy, an open society. And all of our country will have to deal with the diversity. So it doesn't mean with no limits, but it means that the choice is either you create the condition for shared value, for citizenship, for social integration, for education of the children, or you will just have confrontation, ghettoization, and possibility to live together. But for example, in France, but I think it's the same in UK, it's the same in Germany, since many years, not only since last year, there is thousands of people coming from elsewhere in the world and living in our country. And a part of them are from the Muslim community. And we have to work and to discuss with those citizens, because most of them became citizens. Their children were born in France or in UK or in Germany. They are European citizens, about those shared values, about the equality between women and men, about the tolerance, about what we call in France secular state, which is not an obligation in European Union, but the separation between the private sphere and your belief and the common laws, you know. But we have to engage in this discussion. I don't think there is a possibility which is to say, because it's difficult, because it's a problem, because it can create tension, we will close our countries and our society, because it will be all the contrary of what we are and the reality. So I think this is a very important issue. We don't have to, I mean, there is concern, as Marina said, it's a reality. We don't have to say to the people, it's not a problem. Obviously there is a problem, but it has not to lead to an alternative, which is either we protect our value, we close our society, or we will be open society, we will renounce to our value. And I will take another example. We have the problem very concretely now because of the terrorist risk, especially in France after the terrorist attack in Paris. And there was a question, how is it possible to respect our commitments regarding relocation from Greece, for example, when we know that the terrorists use the refugee road, some of them, to come to Paris to do the terrorist attack? We will have to renounce to welcome other refugees from Greece? No. We have to reinforce the checking, the screening, in plus of the, it's an addition to the fact that you verify that people are really refugees, not only migrants, economic migrants, but we do it. And I think we are one of the top countries in terms of relocation from Greece, because we have decided to do it, even if it needs more checking. But I think the answer will not be to say, okay, we have found the answer to the security risk, we close the country, we will not have any other refugee people, or because those terrorists claim that they are doing it in the name of a religion, we refuse the people from this religion. I think that's not the answer. Our answer will be to show that our European value are strong enough to build a common citizenship and a common future.
Thank you. Mr. Polenz.
Just an answer to your question with regard to Middle East. First, we have to take into account that the United States will, to more extent, withdraw from the region than they were committed in the last decades due to their own energy situation and due to their pivot to Asia. This means if we are now looking for solutions in the Middle East, it is again up to Europe, and if we want to have influence, we can only influence the region together and not country by country. Second point, because it would take another panel to discuss this more in detail, the basic conflict in the region right now is between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And we have to work on this. There are ideas of having a Helsinki kind process in the region and so on and so on. But I agree, we have to be much more active in the diplomatic field with our means to engage in the Middle East, because the United States will not do it for Europe again.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest mistakes of politicians is to be engaged in wishful thinking. And I think we should really face the reality. And in my understanding, maybe I'm mistaken, I would be thankful if I would be mistaken. I think we are in a period in a global or world development where we are increasingly facing fragmentation. Fragmentation in media we can see because of also partly new technologies, fragmentation in international trade and economics. I'm getting with every month more pessimistic, for instance, about TTIP. Not because I like it, but I think there will be more and more opposition to this. And also political fragmentation, what we can see in Europe and other continents. So I think if we assume that this is a fact, then at this moment we have to be careful how to put our sails once we go against the wind. You know, we are coming here also with Mr. Timmermans from the Sea Nations, so there is a sailing method how to do it, but we should not spit against the wind. And that is the biggest danger, I think. So we should really smartly do what we can do. And I would say that three things. First, about migration and integration. Of course, migration always has been the part of the world, and nobody can stop it. It will always happen. The question is, do we believe in individual integration, and can we manage that or not? And with all the respect to success in London and other places, I personally believe more in individual success of integration. And I would not say that actually integration perspective in many Western European countries have been extremely successful examples. I don't think that they have been a very successful examples or convincing. Secondly, or thirdly, what to do? It's a difficult answer, but probably I have to stop where I started, that passivity is more costly than activity. And I think Obama made a mistake with Syria. And we all made a mistake because in European Union and European continent we have been disarming for a long time. We were thinking that with our soft power we can manage the world. We can't, because foreign policy is a complex matter. It's not just Marxist economic social issue. It is complex of economic, social tools and also military tools. And if we would be engaged in some more complex way, in Syrian case, if we would follow at that time, I think it was, please excuse me if I'm mistaken, also Erdogan's proposal to create a safe fly zones, we would be in a different situation. Now simply we showed our weakness, and as a Protestant from Northern Europe, I'm not a religious man, it's very much, I would say we should look for guilt in ourselves, not in others. It's not the Russians who were misusing Syria, so it's us who were incapable to foresee it, and we were incapable to do something. And now we are dependent on Russians in Crimea, in Ukraine, in energy, in Syria. This is because we did not do our homework. What is our homework today? Brilliant question. I have no full answer, but I think we should start step by step, putting, again, a horse on the front of the carriage and not behind. So that means, yes, we have to check our borders and administer them better. Yes, we have to figure out, finally, we did not do that fully in the European Union, which are the safe third countries, actually, because everybody can come. Then we have to figure out how do we do with foreign and assistance policy. And then afterwards, once we will know what are those people whom we have to share, then we have to find out, finally, I would say, a just and acceptable possibility how to share. But if we start from the other side, we will fail.
Thank you. Ms. Kaljurand, you have the last word.
Thank you. And I would like to talk completely about a different subject. Because,
Wow. That's an
because so many
anticlimax.
right things have been said. But I have a charity box with me. And it's not for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Although we are undergoing severe cuts, but tomorrow is a special day.
Is that because you're in the Euro?
Yes. There will be charity boxes all over Tallinn. And it's a private charity for cancer treatment. To those patients who are not 100% supported by state insurance companies. So, checks are not accepted. All currencies are accepted. I'll be walking tomorrow with this box. And if this box will not be with me, it will be with registration. So please, these are my last words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you all for staying up so late. See you bright and early in the morning. If I can find a round of applause for the wonderful panel. Thank you.